right, so we will get right into it with our first speaker, Mr. George Casey. George joined Toastmasters in October of 2010 in pursuit of a career as a motivational speaker. However, when he became a member of the CSX Toastmasters Club and began to attend meetings regularly, he found much more than that. He found a passion and a love for leadership. He quickly became his club's SAA and would begin a journey of fulfillment. His love for Toastmasters and leadership led him to be an instrumental force in beginning a second club at CSX, in which he presided as the inaugural president. Over the next couple of years, he would go on to become Area 10 governor and then eventually serve as Division A governor. George's passion for the development of others as well as for himself has since become his driving force in life. Still on the path of motivational speaker, George spends most of his free time enjoying and attending regular Toastmasters meetings and inspiring others to find the greatness in themselves. Please join me in welcoming past Division A Governor, delivering the speech entitled SEMPER Fi, Mr. George Casey.
How long is the speech?
10 to 15.
10 to 15.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters.
Good morning.
Good morning. To take the next moment or two to think about one word this morning. Faithfulness. Faithfulness. When you hear a word like faithfulness, Jeannie, please tell us, what do you think about?
Hope.
Hope. Now, Jared, when you hear a word like faithfulness, what do you think about?
Consistency.
Consistency.
Undying passion.
Undying passion. Amanda?
Dedication.
Dedication.
Commitment.
Commitment. I love all of these answers. And the reason I asked you to think about faithfulness is for a word that I learned through the United States Marine Corps. They use a Latin phrase called Semper Fidelis. Semper Fidelis. When we as Marines, we kind of shorten that and we just say Semper Fi.
Right.
It means always faithful. Semper Fidelis is a Latin word that means always faithful. And this has helped me out after the Marine Corps. But prior to that, I didn't have this faithfulness that we all talked about. I didn't have this commitment. I didn't have this passion. I didn't have none of these things to go with my drive in life to be successful. There's a quote by a guy, Socrates, one of my great philosophers, favorite philosophers. It says, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And as I began to examine my life, and I went back as far as my freshman year in high school, when I went out for the freshman football team. It was a short-lived career, but I went out for it. And this particular day that I'm referring to, we were doing what's called two-a-day practice. We had two practices in the same day. And then on this particular second practice, we were doing what's called up-downs. Now, up-downs, that's when you kind of run in place, and when the coach blows the whistle, you hit the ground and jump back up and begin to run in place again. For this particular day, we had done so many up-downs that I could barely feel my legs. I could barely feel my arms as I would try to push myself off the ground. And I would kind of roll and lift myself up and begin to run in place again. Well, I began to listen to those voices in the back of my head that began to tell me there's pain in this situation. I began to listen to those voices in the back of my head that says, you can only do 5 more of these. The pain was too much to bear that day. And as I began to count down again in the back of my mind, I began to hope and wish and pray that the coach would end practice within those next 5 up-downs. But I wasn't so lucky that day. Because the coach continued, even after I counted all the way down to 1 and was barely able to lift myself off the ground for that last one. I hoped and I wished and I prayed, please let practice end. There was no such thing. And when I got to that last one, the pain had subsided. And I walked off that field and I quit that day. I didn't just quit on myself. It would have been easy if I were just quitting on myself. But I quit on my teammates. And I quit on those people who believed in me. And see, on that day, the course of my life had been changed. The course of my life had been changed. You know what I'm saying? If you do what's easy now, later on, your life will be hard. But if you do what's hard now, later on, your life would be easy. Well, on that day, I took the easy way out, which made my life harder later on. I quit. And every time after that time, quitting became just a little bit easier, and a little bit easier, and a little bit easier, to where it was nothing for me to quit. It was nothing for me to give up. I remember as a child, I would walk into the stores and I would see a candy bar on the shelf. And I would take that candy bar and I put it in my pocket and I walked out of the store. Well, every time after that, it became easier and easier and easier. And see, that's how I began to be known. That's how I was known to be recognized as a thief, as a quitter, someone who didn't have what it took. That was me. That was me. Well, when I graduated high school, my senior guidance counselor sat me down and she asked me, George, what are you going to do with your life? I thought the first thing I figured she wanted to hear. I heard a lot of people talking about college. So I said, I'm going to go to college. She told me on that day, she said, you know what? I don't think college is a good choice for you. I believe you need to go in the military. And so in the back of my mind, as I'm listening to her tell me that I'm not good enough. But I'll prove it to her. I'm going to go to college anyway. Not only did I waste my time, but I wasted my parents' money. Because when I got to college, they told me the very first day, they told me, we're not going to monitor when you come to class. That was my easy way out. So as I began to skip class 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, it became easier and easier and easier. And see, these bad choices would then begin to add up as I began to do more things that I'm not proud of to this day. As those choices led me to homelessness and living in the backseat of a car on cold nights. I remember waking up early and getting out of that car just so no one would see me sleeping in there. And see, that homelessness led me to Hinesville, Georgia, where I ran into one of my cousins who stayed there. And she again sat me down. And she asked, George, what are you going to do with your life? Again, I didn't have a clue. So I spat out the first answer that I knew. Well, I talked to a Marine Corps recruiter, and he told me he can get me out of here pretty soon. She said, no. Don't just think about it. You need to do it. You need that structure in your life. You need that discipline in your life, and that's going to change. It's going to help you in the long run. So I took my cousin's advice. I landed on Paris Island, South Carolina. All those yellow footprints that you would see on movies and commercials. I found myself standing on those footprints at attention. While drill instructors would yell at me. My first thought was, what did I get myself into? The next thought was I good enough? Did I have what it took? Well, the very next day, they set us up for what's called initial strength test. And in this initial strength test, you have to do a series of crunches, pull-ups, and you have to run 1.5 miles in just under 13 minutes. The sit-ups, the crunches, and the pull-ups, that was no problem. But I knew in the back of my mind, I knew that run would give me problems. And as I set out for that run, I only got maybe into about 1/2 mile into the run before I began to run out of energy, before I began to feel that pain, before I began to give up and quit. Because I quit so many times before, it was easy. It was nothing for me to quit. Not even at Paris Island with 4 or 5 hard-charging Marine Corps drill instructors coming behind me. Well, that night, when I laid down in my bed, I began to think about what I wanted out of life. I began to ask myself, as my guidance counselor did, as my cousin did, George, what are you going to do with your life? And then that night, after a few tears, I made up in my mind that I'm going to become a United States Marine. And a drill instructor that I met when I first got there, he told me 7 words that would change the rest of my life, that changed the course of my life. He said, Casey, I'm going to bust your freaking heart. And those weren't the 7 words, but those are 7 words I'll never forget. The 7 words he told me is, Casey, pain is only weakness leaving the body. Pain is only weakness leaving the body. And I began to believe him as my body would go through torture day after day after day. And as I would do it, as I would go through that pain and endure that pain, I knew what I wanted was on the other side of that pain. I knew I wanted to be a United States Marine. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful to God, country, core. Always faithful to myself. I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be a United States Marine. So I fought through 13 weeks of hardcore training. Every day I paid the price through my pain, tears, sweat, blood. I paid the price. I earned the title of United States Marine. On February 23rd, 1996, on the parade deck at Paris Island in front of my family and friends, I earned that title. I earned that title. And see, setting it up, looking back on that, it changed the course of my life, becoming a Marine. Staying faithful to God, country, core. Staying faithful to myself. And I began to, after that, begin to ask myself, begin to challenge myself, what else can I accomplish? I never thought I would be a Marine. When I got back home, I found out that people were taking bets on just how long I would last. But I lasted the whole round. And in my mind, I didn't worry about the pain anymore. I stopped worrying about the pain, but started worrying about the purpose. The purpose. I knew there was a bigger purpose for my life. As I began to set my goals, as I began to accomplish things in life, I began to get that confidence, to get those ideas in the back of my head that would quiet down those other voices of doubt, insecurity, fear, that would tell me that you are good enough, that you are good enough, that you have honor. You're a man that's upstanding. You have courage. You will do what others will not do, even in spite of fear. And you have commitment. You have to be able to commit to whatever you want in this lifetime. You have to be able to commit to that picture that you see, that vision. And as I walk away, I'm going to give you the 4 things that everyone needs to be successful. And it's based loosely off Muhammad Ali's acronym that stands for the greatest of all time. GOAT. The GOAT, principles of success. And I learned this by becoming the greatest within myself. And those letters stand for G. Set a goal. I had to set a goal. I had to know what I wanted out of life. Time and time again, people would ask me, what do you want out of life? And I couldn't give them a great answer. But now, I find myself knowing exactly what I want. I've aligned myself with my purpose. And I set goals to reach those accomplishments. And as I accomplish one goal, I always ask myself, what else can you accomplish? What else can you accomplish? The O is the outcome. It's that vision. You have to stay true to that vision. You have to hold that vision and commit to whatever outcome that you want in life. A, accountability. You have to be accountable for your actions or lack of actions. You can't go through life blaming someone for what you've become, what you are. You are who you are because of your life choices. You become who you become because of the choices that you make and the course in life that you take. You have to be accountable. And the last one is very important, the thought process. See, our thoughts can either make us or break us. They can either lead us to who we will be or they'll lead us to our defeat. You have to begin to think, as Muhammad Ali did, who said, I am the greatest. And I said that even before I knew I was. You have to begin to think of the greatness that's already inside you. You have to be able to think in a manner that will release the greatness that's inside everyone. So those 4 things. Set your goals. Commit to your outcome. Be accountable. And always, always think in terms of you are the greatest. Thank you.